Hey everyone, I'm Sean Deveney from Heavy.com Sports. I think I just surprised our NBA insider, Steve Bulpett, by jumping on a little ahead of schedule. Hi, Steve. How are you this morning?
I'm living the dream, Sean.
As always, as always.
It's the afternoon, so who's surprised here?
Well, that's a good point. It's a good point. It's daylight saving, so I'm all screwed up. A lot going around the league. Let's start with Boston, where you'll be tomorrow. Kevin Garnett will have his number retired. I am of the mind that I don't know that they necessarily deserves that. I mean, this is a proud organization, and he did not play very long for the Celtics. Obviously, they won a championship, and that seems to be enough to have gotten his number retired. What do you think about that?
Well, I think they look at him for his impact during the time he was with the Celtics. I think that's what's got him there. There are some interesting numbers up there. I mean, Reggie Lewis is up there because of his impact, and his, obviously the tragic circumstances of his passing. Would he have gotten up there eventually, Reggie? I think there's good reason to believe that to be the case. But there's a lot of numbers up there. We can get into the whole idea of whether teams should retire numbers or not. I'm in the not camp, but actually kind of a funny, to digress, but I guess it's kind of what I do. One of the easiest notes every year was whatever team Don Nelson was coaching, because, the guys they can be very good, great players. And then they kind of look different a few years after they finish playing.
Yeah.
So one of the notes you would do every year is whatever team Nelly was coaching, you'd go up to his rookies and say, "See that number 19 up there? That's for your coach." And I remember doing that to just being courtside during warm-up, so during the early warm-up time, and telling Chris Webber, "See that number 19 up there? That's for your coach there." And he was like, he didn't believe me. Then I finally convinced him it was true, and Chris convulsed in laughter. And I don't think he stopped until like the second quarter. I think the Celtics got an early lead because Weber was still freaking laughing.
Yeah, you could argue that maybe Nelson shouldn't be up there either. He was sort of a role player. He hit the shot in '69. It's probably the reason that he's there. He had actually been released by the Lakers a few years earlier than that, and turned around and hit the shot that won them the championship, that Game 7 in LA. That's again, I guess that's what it takes to get up into the rafters in Boston.
So, to get to the issue, I don't think numbers should be retired. I wrote a piece about it a couple of years ago that with the Celtics, you're going to get to the point where they're fielding a team with numbers, looking like an offensive line in football, because they're just running out of numbers.
Yeah.
And also in Boston, they just have the number up there, the numeral, on these flags. Each of them have several numbers. And I think it's better to have like a ring of honor with their names on it. And if someone in Boston comes to play for the Celtics and wants to wear number 6 and accept the pressure that would go along with that, I want the number of the greatest winner in the history of team sports. Yeah, sure, give me that number. Then they should be able to do that. But I think it's better to just see numbers up there, to have like a ring of honor and see the person's actual name and have their name be a thing that stands in the arena as just kind of notice of their time with the team and their impact on the team.
Yeah, the thing about KG too, I think, is the way that he did connect with Boston fans. There's no question that he was much loved and revered, even if he was here only for a short amount of time. What sort of stands out about his career in Boston for you in the time that you were covering him?
The intensity part, the pregame beating his head into the stanchion, pounding his chest, and the Celtics, as most teams do, before they announce their starting lineup, they have a hype video, and the end of that hype video was KG doing this scream.
Yeah.
And that was signal that it was like and the crowd just it fed off it. It went crazy. So he connected, no question. And you can look at his on-court work, which was obviously huge. But I think when you talk to the Celtic people, and even during that time, they were saying how he just changed the culture, the everything in terms of practices. I mean, practices became intense things, like when Tim Duncan is allowing Greg Popovich to yell at him,
Right.
then that sets the tone. Then no one can bitch about, on the Spurs can bitch about being yelled at, because your best player is cool with that. When Johnson was playing in LA under Pat Riley, we used to go to practices, and Riley would say, okay, let's move on to the next thing, and Magic would say, guys, let's run that one again. So it's guys who create that kind of culture that set a tone. And KG was someone that kind of did that intensity thing in Boston for the Celtics. So that would always kind of put him up there among not just the fans, but with the franchise itself.
Yeah, and I always wonder what would have happened in 2009 if he'd been healthy. If they could have gone back to back. I remember that series. I was in Chicago. I was living in Chicago at the time, so I was at all those Bulls Celtics. That series was just crazy. It was one of the best series I've ever seen. You were on deadline, so maybe it wasn't great for you because there was some double, triple overtime things going on there. But I always wonder if they could have gone back to back. Of course, Perkins gets hurt in Game 7 in 2010. So they only won the one championship, but man, it seemed like they could have won more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely the Garnett injury, and then Game 7. People point to Perkins, but I think it was Game 1 or 2. They got outscored 16-0 in second chance points with Perk playing. So that game was the Celtics had that game and they gave it away. Yeah. Look at I've spoken to guys in the Celtics since then. Talk about KG. If KG posts up in that game, guys are saying that game is over. But it's funny, how that you think, okay, Kobe came through it. No, he didn't. Kobe had a terrible game.
Yeah.
And the Lakers, were able to still win that. So, that's kind of one that I think the Celtics, I know they look at as one that got away.
Yeah. They KG, when he posted up on Pau Gasol, really had an easy time with them, but just didn't do it enough.
Yeah, it's like if he gets the ball in the post, he's either going to make a play, score, or get fouled, go to the free throw line, and he'll make free throws. And it also would have, kind of broken up the Lakers' run because they had to come back from 13 down or so. So but you get the idea. You get the instead the visage of Ron. Was he Meta World Peace at that point yet? I think he might have been.
Yeah. Right.
The artist formerly known as Ron Artest.
That's right.
But yeah, he's firing away, and Kobe had just an awful game by Kobe standards.
Right. Anyway. Just one other thing with the Celtics. They signed Nick Stauskas this week. Any chance we see him? They gave him that non-guaranteed deal heading into next year, sort of like what they did with Jabari Parker. Who they did give a chance to, but I think Stauskas' deal is the guarantee is in July, so they don't have the time that they had with Parker. Any chance you see him with the Celtics on the floor at all in the coming weeks or next year?
Well, yeah, I think it'd be kind of hard to look if he goes in the game and starts hitting, then they'll let him go maybe. But they've expanded the rotation a little bit, and he's still not in it. And I don't know when Nesmith comes back, will he get that shot first? It's kind of hard, especially for a shooter, to come off the bench and be totally cold and come in and hit a shot. they've got to have some rhythm. I mean, you saw what Stauskas was doing in the G League, but that came not. I'm not pointing out that it was against G League people, because there were still guys that are, real basketball players. But he was able to get a rhythm. He was able to get his touches and get his shots, and not worry that, each shot wasn't an event like we've talked about with Neesmith and certain guys. It can't be that. It's got to be something that comes naturally in a flow. And I'm not sure if he'll get that unless there are injuries that kind of force him to get those opportunities. But he's a kind of guy. Look, they've already got a guy on the roster prior, Sam Hauser, who could be that guy that stands there and hits shots and spreads the floor for you.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the things that was curious to me about signing Stauskas is, if Hauser has a chance, he's a young guy. Stauskas is already 28, 29. He's been in the league, has been back and forth. If Hauser has a chance to be that guy, then you would think that that maybe you'd look to develop him. So I thought it was a little strange that they brought him in. His guarantee date is July 15th, so they can see how free agency plays out, and then say, well, if we still have a spot, and we've got this guy for the minimum, maybe we give him a chance.
Which I thought interesting was that he gets to Boston and he says, that if things didn't work out this year, he was going to be thinking about whether basketball's a thing for him anymore.
Yeah.
So it's he's not a guy that's like going to be scrounging around trying to keep alive a dream. It's either going to be there or it's not.
Yeah.
It seems like he's ready to make a decision.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Again, I'm Sean Deveney from Heavy.com Sports, and this is Steve Bulpett, our NBA insider. All year, of course, the topic sort of lingering over the league has been the Lakers and what's going on with them. LeBron gives them 50 points and a win over the hapless at this point Wizards, and that makes them all of 8-18 in their last 26. Despite that, they are still the number 9 seed in the Western Conference, despite being a team that, to me, looks like they want their season over to be over in the worst way. I know you've held on to the idea that the Lakers, you get them in the playoffs and nobody wants to see them. You get LeBron, you get Anthony Davis. Do you still hold that? Where do you stand on that now?
Yeah, if healthy, it changes their context. If Anthony Davis is on the floor with LeBron, it changes things. You've got two of the guys who are among the handful of best players in the league on the floor together. 40% of your lineup would be major elite players. So, would the Lakers then be good enough to make it a 2-minute game against whoever they played? Answer, yes. And with those two guys, would they be good enough to win that 2-minute game? Yeah. I mean, the odds would be against them. I'm not saying that they'd be the favorite to knock off seeds 1, 2. There might be a different story against the Grizzlies because of their youth. But, against the Warriors or against the Phoenix Suns or even the Denver Nuggets, perhaps in a 7-game series, would I say that the Lakers would be a favorite? No. But would I give them a chance? Would I say that I'd be concerned if I was the opponent? Sure.
It just seems like they're punched out, man. It just seems like they've said we're done with this for this year. So I don't know. And a big part of that is Russell Westbrook. He does not seem to be interested in being there. He's had his little battles with the media now, and seems to be doing the full Russell Westbrook all in just a few months here, which has been entertaining to watch. How do you proceed with him? If you're the Lakers, how do you proceed with him? What's the best hope there?
Well, the best hope is that he doesn't opt in, but where else is he going to get that money?
Yeah.
So he's kind of yours, right?
Yeah.
If they could work out a situation, well, first of all, if he could ever get to the point where he certainly has the ability to fit in with LeBron and whoever else they put on the floor. But it's been hard because he's been a ball dominant guy. And the Lakers have had some small measures of success when they've got him on the court where he's the guy and he can dominate and, play his game. But that's hard to do, and, we talked about this weeks and weeks ago with regard to Ben Simmons. He has, and I'm not trying to compare the two players, only to the point of when you have someone that has limitations in your context, like with Ben, it was the shooting thing. Can you give someone, and you're giving someone like that max money, huge money, can that really fit on your cap? Can that fit in your salary structure? Simmons in Brooklyn, it's a different story. He doesn't need to be a shooter. They don't want him to shoot. Other guys will take those shots. But you're still paying him a lot of money to not be a max player. And I think the similar thing is the situation with Russell Westbrook. And excuse me, I was talking with Cedric Maxwell the other day on his podcast, and we were talking about Russell, and it's like, is he really a winning player? Is he numbers, or is he a guy that finds ways to translate whatever he does into winning? Is he, and it's hard. It's hard to look at that and see how that works.
Yeah, and I think a trade is the only option there. The question is, of course, where do you send them? Because you've got to find a team that has enough salaries that they're just dying to get rid of, and they'd be willing to take him back just because he is that expiring contract. I went through everybody's payrolls, and I cannot find anybody. The team that probably makes the most sense, and the one thing that maybe could work out if the Lakers were willing to attach at least one first-round pick. They've got that 2027 one that became a topic of discussion at the trade deadline. The one thing that I've heard is that's possible is, Oklahoma City could take Russell back into cap space because they will have, believe it or not, they will have enough cap space, much like they did with Kemba Walker this past year. And at that point, they could either release him or let him play out a year in Oklahoma City, just because, obviously he did a lot for that team, and that team still has a big appreciation for him. Maybe a long shot, but that might be the best case scenario. If you're the Lakers, maybe you get a player back like a Derek Favors or something like that. But that's probably the best you're going to do.
Yeah, it's hard when a guy gets to the point where he's publicly being upset about what's being said about him by the fans. When he's kind of, look, I'm really big. First of all, I think that, fans should go and support their guys, and I'm not sure why you'd want to injure someone on your own team. But I'm also of the mind that you pay your money as long as you're not being vulgar. You paid the money. You're the fan, and I'm not going to rail against that. But when it gets to that point with the player, then I start to wonder if this is something that's getting under his skin. What would Game 7 of a NBA Finals do to him?
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, it's hard to see that working out well. But then again, if the Lakers get on a run, and if somehow Russell learns to subjugate his game a little bit, and they get on a run, and he's playing a role, then everyone will be happy.
Yeah. I don't see why they haven't at least tried bringing him off the bench. Obviously they would want to get his approval for that, and maybe they've asked and he said no. But at some point you say, well, we're paying your check, so we're going to put you on the bench. And it seems like around now would be a good time to at least try that and see if you can't salvage something here. But it's not happened yet.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, who's running the situation, and it's hard because it's like you feel like if you go against a player that much that he but like to your point, tell me how much worse it can get.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And on the opposite end of the spectrum, I think we have a team that is quietly the best team in the East. I think it's been pretty quiet around this team. They haven't had the major trade. They haven't had a lot of hoopla around them. But the Miami Heat have built a pretty good lead in the Eastern Conference as the number 1 seed. They're going to get Markieff Morris back possibly today. There's a lot going well for Miami right now, but there's still a sense that they're not really a true favorite. If you go to Vegas, you could probably get pretty good odds on them in terms of even winning the East, let alone winning a championship. What's your view on that? Are they being slept on a little bit, or are they right where they ought to be just because they don't necessarily have that superstar guy who can win your game in the playoffs?
Well, I mean, they've got guys that can, they're out, Tyler Hero off the bench, Duncan Robinson, but of course, Jimmy Butler and Adebayo can do some severe damage. I just, as we're talking, as you were setting that up, I'm thinking that the Heat, I'd kind of compare it to the old days when the U.S. teams at first, before they put the dream team together, there were U.S. pro teams that would get in situations and get beaten by these European teams that like I remember, was it it was, and even this is even after they were using pros, and the World Championships one year that Greece, my people, beat the U.S. right in the World Championship one year,
2006. Yep.
Yeah, and then they partied so hard they lost the next game.
Yeah,
also my people. But you get a European team that's together and understands itself and plays into roles, and they're not worried about catering to a superstar there, right? There's not that issue. We're talking about these Laker issues. None of these issues exist in Miami. They kind of know where they all fit. And if Duncan Robinson misses 3 trays in a row, the guys aren't looking at him sideways. It's like, shoot the 4th one. So they know who they are. And I think there's some benefit to that. And yeah, you overlook them because they don't have guys that are, in the Sports Center top 10 every night, but they're still a team that plays well together and understands itself better.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Kyle Lowry could make a real big difference there as a guy who's won a championship.
I left his name out, and I shouldn't have.
Well, and when you look at crunch time numbers, Jimmy Butler has had some struggles in late game situations this year. He's shooting 29% in the clutch according to the NBA's numbers. Kyle Lowry shooting 57% in the clutch. I think if they recognize that, especially down the stretch of these playoff games, and run some stuff through Kyle Lowry, again, him having been there before for one thing, but also he's just been doing it better all year. I think he could be a real key. They're also, man, they're the deepest team. They're the deepest playoff team. When you look at it, and you get to the playoffs, and of course you don't play a 10-man rotation. But what you can do is matchups, and I think especially getting Markieff Morris back, that could be big for him for them. He played a role in the Lakers winning in 2020 because he was able to come in when they wanted to go small against Houston. They played him at center, and that's just not necessarily that Miami's going to do that, but it gives them that option where they can play matchups probably better than anybody else.
Yeah, and they can also with their depth, they can do more about pushing the pace. Generally in the playoffs, it becomes a little bit more of a possession game, right? But they'll try to push pace more and throw bodies at you. And again, they're kind of one of those group of guys that always seems to keep the court down at the park. And they've got a real toughness about them, a toughness mentality. And they don't play the superstar game, So yeah, look, do I think they're going to represent the East in the NBA Finals this year? I don't think so. But would I be surprised if they're there? You can't be.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's and I think they're a team that will do well, that is built well for playoffs. But there are teams that are regular season teams. Regular season basketball and playoff basketball are very close to being different sports. Just with the way that you get to hone in on how you want to scheme against a team. You're not going to spend time in practice, a few hours in practice over a couple of days going over a team when you've got 3 games in 4 nights, or you're playing every other night, or you've got a back-to-back here or there. But you do that during the postseason, and it allows teams to expose an opponent's weaknesses more. But I really like watching Miami play basketball. But if the Brooklyn Nets get whole and get it together, that's a team that would scare the heck out of anyone. Also, Philadelphia, they had that major cleanup on aisle 5 against the Nets this week. How's that going to work out? But there, so I look at the East as being wide open. We're not even bringing the Celtics into that conversation. And who else aren't we bringing into that conversation yet? Oh yeah, the Milwaukee freaking Bucks, your defending NBA champions. So in a lot of years you can say, okay, here's the chalk, here's how it should work out, here's how it should play out. I don't think you can do that in the East this year. And I think there's at least some question in the West, but certainly the East would seem to be wide open. Yeah.
There's 5, maybe 6 teams that, like you say, you might not necessarily pick them to win the East, but you wouldn't be surprised if, in fact, they do win it. So a regular season will be wrapping up in a month. We'll have playoffs shortly thereafter. Hard to believe, but that's where we are in the NBA. So interesting to watch what will happen down the stretch here as well. So thanks a lot for joining me, Steve, and thanks to everyone watching. And we'll catch up with you guys later.